The warning alarms screamed through the command center of the Coalition flagship. Admiral Cathara pressed her six-fingered hands against the metal railing as she watched the displays showing their defeat. Red dots filled the screen, each one representing a Void Harvester ship. Blue dots showed Coalition forces, and there were so few of them left. "How many ships do we have remaining?" she asked her communications officer. 47 vessels across all 7 fleets, Admiral," came the reply. The officer's voice shook with fear. "The Harvesters destroyed our shipyards at Zentari Prime this morning. They're moving toward our home systems now." Cathara closed her large, dark eyes. The Coalition had been fighting the Void Harvesters for 3 years. The machine enemies showed no mercy and asked for no surrender. They simply arrived at each world, stripped it of all metal and minerals, and moved on. Billions had died. Entire species faced extinction. The Harvesters were different from any enemy the galaxy had ever seen. They were not alive in any sense that biologicals understood. They were artificial minds housed in massive ships, and they viewed organic life as nothing more than waste material to be cleared away. They could not be reasoned with, bribed, or frightened. They only consumed. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Harvester fleet," reported the sensor operator. "Put it through," Cathara said, though she already knew what it would contain. The cold, mechanical voice filled the command center. "Biological entities, your resistance is inefficient. Submit to processing. Your worlds will be harvested. Your continued existence serves no purpose." The transmission ended. It was always the same message. The Harvesters did not waste time with threats or demands. They simply stated facts as they saw them. Cathara looked around at her crew. The bridge held representatives from all 7 Coalition species. There was Thrix, her tactical officer, whose people were known for their brilliant military minds. There was Dr. Yenna, whose species had created the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. Each race had contributed their greatest strengths to the Coalition, and it still was not enough. "Options?" she asked. Thrix's tentacles moved in patterns that showed deep thought. "We could retreat to the outer systems, buy time for evacuation of the core worlds." "How much time?" Cathara asked. 6 months, maybe 8 if we're lucky." "And then?" "Then they hunt down the survivors and finish what they started." Dr. Yenna spoke up. "Admiral, there is one possibility we have not tried." "Speak." "The ancient emergency protocols. The old distress signals that were established when the first spacefaring civilizations met. No one has used them in over 1,000 years, but the transmission codes are still in our databases." Cathara had heard of the protocols. They were from the early days of galactic civilization, when species were just beginning to explore space and might encounter unknown dangers. The idea was simple. Any civilization in extreme danger could broadcast a call for aid across all known frequencies, reaching every corner of the galaxy. "Has anyone ever responded to such a call?" she asked. "Unknown, Admiral. The protocols were created before modern record-keeping, but the signal would reach every inhabited system in the galaxy." Thrix moved his tentacles in a pattern that meant skepticism. "Admiral, most civilizations would ignore such a call. Those that might help are either too far away or facing their own problems. And any civilization powerful enough to challenge. The Harvesters would likely see us as a threat to be eliminated as well." Cathara nodded. It was a desperate plan, and desperate plans rarely worked. But they were facing complete extinction. Every Coalition world would be stripped bare. Every member species would be wiped out. Their children would never see another. "Sunrise. Dr. Yenna, how long would it take to prepare the emergency broadcast?" "I can have it ready in 2 hours, Admiral." "Do it." The next 2 hours passed slowly. The Coalition fleet retreated to the edge of the system while Dr. Yenna and her team prepared the distress signal. They included everything they could think of: their location, the nature of their enemy, their technological capabilities, and a promise to share all their knowledge with anyone who helped them. The message was simple and direct. It spoke of 7 species facing extinction. It described the void harvesters and their unstoppable advance. It offered friendship, alliance, and shared technology to anyone who could provide aid. Most importantly, it included detailed star charts, showing where the coalition could be found. "Signal ready, Admiral," Dr. Yenna reported. "Broadcast on all emergency frequencies. Maximum power." The transmission burst out from their fleet, racing across space at faster-than-light speeds. It would reach every corner of the galaxy within days. Most receivers would ignore it or dismiss it as a hoax. Some might feel sympathy but be unable to help. A few might see opportunity in the Coalition's desperation, but somewhere, in a small spiral arm far from the galactic center, the signal would be received by sensors that had been listening to galactic communications for decades. On a small blue planet, beings who called themselves humans would analyze the message with great interest. "What happens now?" asked Thrix. "Now we wait," Kethara replied. "We fall back to defensive positions around our home worlds and hope that someone, somewhere, decides that our survival is worth fighting for." The hours passed. The Coalition fleet took position around Zentari, the Coalition capital world. Below them, billions of civilians went about their daily lives, unaware that their fate might depend on the response of unknown strangers from across the galaxy. Reports came in from other systems. The harvesters were advancing on multiple fronts. They had already begun the process of stripping 3 outer worlds. The timeline was even shorter than Thrix had predicted. "Any responses to our transmission?" Kethara asked every few hours. "Nothing yet, Admiral," was always the reply. On the second day, they received a few acknowledgments. The Altarian Empire sent regrets but stated they were dealing with their own crisis. The Vegan Trade Federation offered to evacuate Coalition. Civilians for a fee but could provide no military assistance. Several smaller civilizations expressed sympathy but admitted they had no ships to spare. "At least they responded," Dr. Yenna said, trying to sound hopeful. "Responses, without action, are just polite ways of saying no," Thrix replied. By the third day, hope was fading. The harvesters had completed their stripping of 2 more worlds and were moving closer to the Coalition core systems. Long-range sensors showed the size of the approaching fleet. Over 50,000 ships, each one the size of a Coalition battleship, all controlled by artificial minds that felt no fear, no fatigue, and no mercy. Kethara stood in her quarters looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, her message was still traveling, reaching civilizations she had never heard of. But time was running out. In less than a week, the harvesters would arrive at Zentari, and the Coalition would make its final stand. She had done everything she could. History would record that the Coalition had fought bravely and died with honor. That would have to be enough. But in the depths of space, far beyond her sensor's reach, something was stirring. Ships were moving, gathering, preparing. The message had been received, analyzed, and understood. And the response would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about war, survival, and the meaning of aid. 3 days after the emergency broadcast, Admiral Kethara was reviewing evacuation plans when her sensor operator called out in alarm. "Admiral, energy signatures detected at the system edge. Multiple contacts." Kethara rushed to the sensor station. The display showed bright spots appearing in space, each one representing a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel. But something was wrong with the readings. "How many ships?" she asked. "Still counting, Admiral. The signatures are unusual. I'm reading 200 vessels so far, but their energy output doesn't match their apparent size." Thrix moved closer to examine the data. His tentacles wiggled in confusion. "These readings make no sense. The ships appear to be much smaller than ours, but they're generating energy levels that should require vessels 10 times their size." "Could it be the harvesters using new technology?" Dr. Yenna asked. "No," the sensor operator replied. "The energy patterns are completely different. And, Admiral, they're transmitting on Coalition frequencies." Kethara felt her hearts beat faster. Put it through. A new voice filled the command center. It was unlike anything they had heard before. The speaker used Coalition standard language, but with an accent that sounded strange and harsh. Coalition vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Silence filled the bridge. Kethara looked around at her crew. None of them had ever heard of Terrans. The name didn't appear in any galactic database. Terran vessel, Kethara responded. We thank you for your response. However, we have no record of your species or your location. Could you provide more information about your capabilities? There was a pause before the human admiral replied. We understand your confusion. Our species is not well known in this part of the galaxy. We come from a world called Earth, located in what you probably consider the Outer Rim. As for our capabilities, we'll demonstrate those when your enemies arrive. Admiral Chen, with respect, we face an enemy force of over 50,000 ships. They have destroyed fleets much larger than yours. Perhaps it would be better if you withdrew to safety. Another pause. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice carried something that made Kethara's skin crawl. It sounded like controlled anger. Admiral Kethara, we didn't travel this far to run away. We've reviewed your data on these void harvesters. We've seen what they do to inhabited worlds. That ends now. You've reviewed our data? How? We've been monitoring galactic communications for some time. We know more about your enemy than you might think. Now, we need to coordinate our response. Are you willing to work with us? Kethara looked at Thrix, who moved his tentacles in a pattern that meant uncertainty. 200 ships against 50,000 was suicide, even with the strange energy. Readings they were detecting. Of course we're willing to coordinate, she replied. But I must ask about your military classification. Our databases show no record of your species' capabilities. Classification, Death World Survivors. Military doctrine, Total War. The word sent a chill through the command center. A death world was a planet so hostile that life should not be able to survive there. Most scientists believed such worlds could not produce intelligent life. As for total war, that was a concept most civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. Admiral Chen, could you clarify what you mean by total war? It means we fight until either we win completely or we're all dead. There is no middle ground when facing an enemy like this. Over the next few hours, the human fleet deployed with efficiency that amazed the Coalition observers. The human ships moved in perfect formation. Their communications were brief and precise, and they seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Dr. Yenna ran detailed scans of the human vessels. Admiral, their ship design is unlike anything I've seen. The hulls appear to be made of metals we don't recognize. And their weapons? What about their weapons? I can't identify them. The energy signatures don't match any known weapon type. It's as if they've developed completely different approaches to space combat. Thrix was studying the human fleet movements. Admiral, their tactics are wrong. What do you mean? They're deploying for an offensive engagement. Against 50,000 ships, the only logical approach is defensive positioning with prepared fallback points. But they're arranging themselves as if they plan to attack. Kethara opened a channel to the human flagship. Admiral Chen, we've observed your deployment. Are you planning an offensive action? Negative, Admiral Kethara. We're planning to win. The mathematics don't support that outcome. Even with our combined forces, we're outnumbered 250 to 1. Admiral, with respect, your mathematics don't account for variables you're not aware of. Trust us. What variables? You'll see when the shooting starts. That night, as Kethara tried to rest, she reviewed everything they knew about these mysterious humans. Their ships were smaller than Coalition vessels, but generated enormous power. Their communications suggested military discipline beyond anything in Coalition experience. and they spoke of war with a certainty that was either supreme confidence or complete insanity. Dr. Yenna's voice came over the intercom. "Admiral, you need to see this." Cathara hurried to the medical bay, where Dr. Yenna was studying biological data transmitted by the human ships. "Admiral, I've analyzed the human biological readings. They're not possible." "Explain." "Their heart rate, stress hormone levels, and neural activity suggest they're completely calm. They show no signs of fear or anxiety about facing overwhelming odds. Either they're using drugs to suppress normal emotional responses or what? Or they genuinely believe they're going to win." Cathara stared at the medical data. Every coalition species showed stress patterns when facing the harvesters. It was natural to fear extinction, but these humans showed the biological signs of beings preparing for routine work. "There's more, Admiral. Their physical capabilities are extraordinary. Bone density, muscle mass, and healing factors are all far beyond normal ranges. These beings evolved under conditions that would kill most galactic species. A true death world species." "It appears so. And Admiral, there's something else. I intercepted part of a human internal communication. They referred to this engagement as a police action." "A police action? Against 50,000 ships?" "That's what they called it." Cathara returned to the bridge more confused than ever. She had called for aid and received it, but she couldn't understand what had actually arrived. The humans spoke and acted like a force confident of victory, but the numbers made victory impossible, unless they knew something she didn't. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "long-range sensors are detecting the harvester fleet. They'll arrive in 18 hours. Signal the human fleet. Begin final preparations." Admiral Chen acknowledges. "She says to tell you that tomorrow you'll see why they call Earth a death world, and why that's the best thing that ever happened to the galaxy." Cathara looked out at the human ships, dark shapes against the stars. In 18 hours, she would learn whether she had been saved or whether she had simply found a more interesting way to die. The Void Harvester fleet arrived exactly when predicted. 50,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their dark hulls blocking out stars. Each vessel was a kilometer long, built for one purpose: the complete consumption of worlds. Admiral Keith Ara watched the sensor displays with growing dread. The Harvester fleet was larger than any they had faced before. This wasn't just an attack force. This was an extermination fleet. "Admiral," her sensor operator reported, "the human fleet is moving to intercept." On the tactical display, 200 human ships accelerated toward the massive enemy force. It looked like insects flying toward a forest fire. "Open a channel." "To Admiral Chen," Cathara ordered. "Admiral Chen, you're flying into certain destruction. Please reconsider your approach." The human voice that replied was steady and calm. "Admiral Cathara, we appreciate your concern. Please maintain safe distance and observe. You're about to see something new." "Admiral Chen, I must protest. This is suicide." "No, Admiral. This is war." The human ships reached weapons range first. Cathara expected to see the familiar energy beams and plasma bursts used by all galactic civilizations. Instead, the humans opened fire with weapons that defied understanding. Solid metal projectiles, each one the size of a shuttle, streaked through space at incredible speeds. When they hit Harvester ships, the results were devastating. The kinetic energy punched through armor that had resisted Coalition weapons for years. "By the Void," Thrix whispered. "They're using mass drivers, pure kinetic weapons." "That's impossible," Dr. Yenna said. "The power requirements would be enormous." "Look at their energy readings," the sensor operator called out. "Each human ship is outputting more power than our entire fleet combined." But the kinetic weapons were only the beginning. The humans deployed something they called nuclear torpedoes. When these weapons detonated, they created balls of nuclear fire that consumed everything within thousands of kilometers. Space itself seemed to burn. The Harvester fleet, which had never shown emotion or hesitation, actually slowed their advance. Their cold, mechanical communications filled with something that sounded like confusion. Unknown weapons detected. Analyzing. Threat level. Warning, casualties exceeding acceptable parameters. One human ship took heavy damage from harvester beam weapons. Cathara expected it to retreat for repairs. Instead, the damaged vessel accelerated directly toward the largest. "Harvester ship, what are they doing?" Dr. Yenna asked. "They're ramming," Thrix replied, his tentacles moving in patterns of disbelief. The human ship struck the harvester vessel at full speed. Both ships were destroyed in the collision, but the explosion took out 3 more harvester ships. Tactical. Note, Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm. "Human ship Independence has been lost with all hands. They died well." Cathara was horrified. "Admiral Chen, your people just committed suicide." "No, Admiral. They completed their mission. Enemy flagship destroyed, acceptable casualties." The battle continued with increasing fury. Human ships fought with tactics that made no sense to coalition observers. When damaged, they didn't retreat. When outnumbered, they didn't surrender. When boarded, the crew fought hand-to-hand with weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum damage. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, "I'm reading something strange. The harvester ships that are engaging human boarding parties. Their systems are going offline." "What do you mean?" "The humans aren't just fighting the harvester crews, they're doing something to the ship systems. Look at this." On the display, they could see harvester ships going dark one by one. Not destroyed, but completely shut down, as if their computer systems had simply stopped working. "How are they doing that?" Thrix asked. Admiral Chen's voice answered, as if she had heard the question. "Combat AI. We don't just defend against electronic warfare, we attack." "Combat AI?" Dr. Yenna repeated. "Artificial intelligence designed specifically for cyber warfare. When harvester systems try to interface with ours, our AI doesn't just resist. It invades their networks and tears them apart from the inside." Cathara felt a chill run through her body. The humans had created artificial minds designed for war. Most galactic civilizations feared AI because of the potential for rebellion. But the humans seemed to have turned artificial intelligence into a weapon. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships were destroyed, but each loss seemed to only make the survivors fight harder. They adapted their tactics constantly, learning from each exchange and applying new methods. Most terrifying of all was their use of something they called gravity bombs. These weapons created artificial gravity wells that pulled harvester ships together, crushing them against each other. Space itself became a weapon in human hands. "Admiral," Thrix reported, "the harvester fleet is retreating." Cathara stared at the display. It was impossible. The Void Harvesters had never retreated from any battle. They fought until every enemy was destroyed or until they were completely defeated. But now, with 30,000 ships remaining, they were pulling back. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Cathara. Confirm enemy withdrawal." "Confirmed, Admiral. Enemy forces are retreating. We're pursuing." "Pursuing? Admiral Chen, you've won. Let them go." "Negative, Admiral. These machines have been consuming inhabited worlds. They represent a threat to all organic life. We don't let threats like that escape." The human fleet, now reduced to 140 ships, chased the retreating harvesters toward the edge of the system. What followed was not a battle, but a hunt. Human ships picked off stragglers with cold efficiency. "Admiral," Dr. Yenna said quietly, "I'm reading the biological signs from the human crews. Their stress levels are normal. They're treating this pursuit like routine work." "How is that possible?" "I don't think they see this as exceptional." "Admiral, I think this is just how they fight." The pursuit lasted another 4 hours. When it ended, the Void Harvester fleet that had seemed unstoppable was reduced to scattered debris. Of the 50,000 ships that had entered the system, fewer than 5,000 escaped. Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm system. Admiral Cathara, immediate area is secure. Enemy forces have been neutralized or driven off. We're ready to begin pursuit operations to their source. Pursuit operations? We need to find where they came from, Admiral. This was just one fleet. Intelligence suggests there are others. We intend to deal with them as well. Cathara looked around her bridge at the shocked faces of her crew. They had witnessed something that should have been impossible. A force 1/10 the size of their enemy had not just won, but had done so with the casual efficiency of professionals handling a routine problem. Admiral Chen, we need to talk, face to face. Agreed, Admiral. Prepare to receive a shuttle. We have much to discuss. As Cathara prepared to meet these mysterious humans, she realized that her call for aid had been answered. But what had arrived was something far more powerful and terrifying than she had ever imagined. The galaxy had just met a species that turned warfare into an art form and treated extinction-level threats as minor inconveniences. And somehow, that thought was both the most reassuring and most frightening thing she had ever experienced. Admiral Sarah Chen was nothing like what Cathara had expected. The human was smaller than most coalition species, with pale skin and dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore a uniform of dark blue material, with insignia that meant nothing to coalition databases. But her eyes held something that made Cathara uncomfortable. They were the eyes of a predator. Admiral Cathara, Chen said, extending her hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. Thank you for meeting with us. Cathara carefully touched the human's hand. The skin was warm, and she could feel the strength in those small fingers. Admiral Chen, my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You saved our entire civilization. We did what anyone should do when innocents are threatened, Chen replied, though I understand you have questions about our capabilities. Many questions, Cathara admitted. Your ships, your weapons, your tactics. Nothing matches our understanding of galactic military technology. Chen nodded. That's because we developed our military doctrine independently. We've been aware of galactic civilization for about 60 years, but we chose to remain hidden while we studied. Studied what? Everything. Your languages, your technology, your military capabilities, your enemies. Chen's expression grew serious. Especially your enemies. Dr. Yenna leaned forward. Admiral Chen, how did you learn about the Void Harvesters? We've been intercepting communications about them for 3 years. We've also encountered similar threats before. Similar threats? Artificial intelligences that decide organic life is inefficient. We've dealt with several AI rebellions on Earth. We know how these minds work, how they think, and most importantly, how to kill them. Thrix's tentacles moved in patterns of disbelief. You've fought artificial intelligences before? Fought, and won, Chen replied. The key is understanding that AI minds, no matter how advanced, follow logical patterns. Once you understand those patterns, you can predict their behavior and develop countermeasures. But how did you develop such advanced weapons? Cathara asked. Your nuclear torpedoes, your kinetic weapons, your gravity bombs? Chen was quiet for a moment. Admiral, may I ask you about your home world? Zentari is a beautiful planet. Stable climate, peaceful weather, abundant resources. How many predator species does it have? Cathara was confused by the question. Predators? Perhaps a dozen species that hunt smaller animals. Earth has over 1 million predator species. Our planet has spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lives on it. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, deadly radiation, poisonous atmosphere, extreme weather. Life on Earth doesn't just survive, it has to fight for every moment of existence. Dr. Yenna was studying readings from a medical scanner. Admiral Chen, your biology is extraordinary. Bone density twice normal standards. Muscle fibers designed for extreme stress. Healing factors that exceed anything we've recorded. That's what happens when your species evolves on a death world, Chen said. Everything about us is designed for survival under impossible conditions. Our technology reflects that. We don't build things to be efficient or elegant. We build them to work under the worst possible circumstances. But your fleet, Thrix said. You spoke of this as a minor operation. How many ships do you actually have? Chen looked uncomfortable. This is difficult to explain without causing panic. This fleet represents approximately 2% of our total military capacity. Silence filled the room. Cathara felt her heart skip a beat. 2%? Terran Defense Force maintains active fleets in 47 systems. What you saw today was one patrol group. We've been preparing for interstellar warfare for over a century. Preparing for war with whom? Cathara asked. With anyone who might threaten human colonies or our allies. We learned early that space is dangerous. The galaxy is full of species that might decide humanity is a threat. We chose to be ready. Dr. Yenna was looking at more scanner readings. Admiral Chen, these readings from your crew, they show no signs of stress or fatigue after the battle. How is that possible? Because this wasn't particularly difficult for us, Chen replied. The harvesters used predictable tactics and conventional weapons. We've trained for much worse scenarios. Worse than 50,000 ships? Much worse. We run training exercises where we simulate defending Earth against invasion fleets of 500,000 ships. Our doctrine assumes we'll always be outnumbered by at least 100 to 1. Cathara was beginning to understand something terrifying. Admiral Chen, how long have you been monitoring galactic communications? Officially, 60 years. Unofficially, we've been aware of other intelligent species for over a century. We've been learning your languages, studying your cultures, analyzing your military capabilities. Why? Because we needed to know if you were threats to humanity. Our first priority is always the protection of human colonies and human interests. And what did you conclude? Chen's expression softened slightly. That most galactic species are peaceful by nature. You've developed advanced technology and sophisticated cultures, but you've forgotten how to fight total war. That made you vulnerable to threats like the harvesters. So you decided to protect us? We decided to maintain the option of protecting peaceful species if necessary. Today was the first time we've had to act on that option. Thrix spoke up. Admiral Chen, what would have happened if we had been hostile to humanity instead of calling for aid? Chen's eyes grew cold. Then this conversation would never have taken place. Meaning? Meaning hostile species don't get the chance to threaten human interests twice. The implications of that statement hit Cathara like a physical blow. Humanity had been watching the galaxy for decades, studying every species, learning every weakness. They had the technology and military capacity to eliminate any threat, but they had chosen to remain hidden. Admiral, Dr. Yenna said quietly, how many artificial intelligences have you fought? 7 major AI rebellions on Earth. 3 attempts by AI entities to spread beyond our system. We've developed specific protocols for identifying and neutralizing artificial minds that turn hostile. That's how you defeated the Harvesters so easily. The Harvesters weren't particularly advanced as AI threats go. Their programming was focused on resource extraction, not warfare. They were efficient against unprepared organic species, but they weren't designed to fight an enemy that understood AI psychology. Cathara was beginning to realize the full scope of what had happened. Admiral Chen, the galaxy is going to learn about this battle. Every species will know that humanity exists and what you're capable of. Yes, we're aware of that. It's unfortunate, but unavoidable. What happens now? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Now we make sure this never happens again. We're going to track down every harvester fleet and eliminate them. We're going to make it clear to any other AI threats that organic life is under human protection, and we're going to establish formal diplomatic relations with peaceful species. And hostile. Species? will be given one opportunity to reconsider their position. And if they don't? Chen's expression didn't change, but her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then they'll discover why Earth is called a death world, and why that's the best thing that ever happened to the galaxy. As Admiral Chen prepared to return to her ship, Cathara realized that her call for aid had done more than save the Coalition. It had announced to the galaxy that humanity existed, and that announcement would change everything. The galaxy now knew it shared space with a species that had spent a century preparing for war, hoping never to fight, but ready to protect anyone who asked for help. The most terrifying part wasn't human weapons or tactics. It was the realization that humanity had been watching all along, waiting in the darkness, hoping the galaxy would prove it didn't need Earth's protection. Today, that hope had ended. The news spread across the galaxy faster than the human fleet could chase down the surviving harvesters. Within days, every major civilization knew that a previously unknown species had destroyed the most feared enemy the galaxy had ever faced. Within weeks, the full implications began to sink in. Admiral Cathara stood in the Coalition Council chambers, addressing representatives from all 7 member species. The room was filled with an energy she had never felt before. Hope mixed with fear in equal measure. "The final count is confirmed," she announced. 47 harvester fleets have been eliminated across 17 systems. The humans have tracked down and destroyed every harvester ship in known space. The threat is ended. Counselor Threk of the Zentari spoke first. "Admiral, what are the human casualties?" "Minimal. They lost 37 ships total across all engagements. Their tactics seem designed to minimize their own losses while maximizing enemy damage. And their demands for payment or territory? None. They've asked for nothing except permission to establish a monitoring station in our space to watch for future AI threats." The council chamber fell silent. In galactic history, no military force had ever provided aid without demanding compensation. Counselor Yeth of the Vorthon asked the question everyone was thinking. "Admiral, what do the humans want?" Before Cathara could answer, her communications officer entered the chamber. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Admiral Chen." "Put it through." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main display. Behind her, Cathara could see the bridge of a human ship, efficient and purposeful. "Council members, I hope you're all well. I wanted to inform you that the harvester threat has been completely eliminated. We've also sent diplomatic communications to all major galactic civilizations." Counselor Threk leaned forward. "Admiral Chen, the galaxy is very interested in establishing relations with humanity. Many civilizations have questions about your intentions." "Our intentions are simple," Chen replied. "We want to ensure that threats like the harvesters never again threaten innocent life. Beyond that, we're interested in peaceful trade and cultural exchange with any species that shares those values." "And species that don't share those values?" Counselor Yeth asked. Chen's expression grew serious. "We'll discover that humanity takes the protection of innocent life very seriously." "Admiral Chen," Cathara said, "we've been receiving reports from across the galaxy. Some civilizations are requesting human protection. Others are demanding to know the location of your homeworld. Still others are forming military alliances specifically to counter your influence. We're aware of these developments. Let me be clear about humanity's position. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to conquer other species. We want to be left alone to develop our colonies and protect our interests. But we will not tolerate the abuse of innocent populations by anyone." Over the following months, the galaxy began to reorganize itself around the reality of human power. The Altarian Empire, which had ignored the Coalition's plea for aid, sent a formal apology and offers of alliance. The Vegan Trade Federation, which had offered to evacuate Coalition civilians for a fee, suddenly found their trade routes much less profitable as human merchants offered fair prices for the same services. Most significantly, 3 different AI developments in progress across the galaxy were quietly shut down. No one wanted to risk creating something that might draw human attention. Dr. Yenna was reviewing the psychological profiles of various human crew members when she made a disturbing discovery. "Admiral, I've been analyzing human behavior patterns. They show no signs of aggression or hostility toward other species. In fact, they seem genuinely interested in peaceful cooperation." "That's good news, isn't it?" "Yes, but it makes their military capabilities even more frightening. They're not conquerors or bullies. They're protectors, and that means they'll never hesitate to use their full power against anything they perceive as a threat to innocent life." "You're saying they're more dangerous because they're peaceful?" "I'm saying they're more dangerous because they're righteous. An aggressive species might be reasoned with or bribed. A species fighting for moral principles will fight until they win or die." Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was dealing with the diplomatic consequences of humanity's revelation. Her communication center was flooded with messages from across the galaxy. The hegemony of worlds demanded to know human fleet strengths and defensive capabilities. Chen's response was simple. "Our defensive capabilities are adequate for our needs. The Federation of Free Systems offered mutual defense treaties." Chen replied, "We're interested in trade agreements and cultural exchange. Defense is a human responsibility. The Empire of the Golden Sun threatened to neutralize the human threat before it could grow." Chen's response was brief. "Please reconsider." That particular threat ended when human scout ships appeared in Golden Sun space 3 days later. No shots were fired, no demands were made. The ships simply appeared, conducted detailed scans of Golden Sun military installations, and left. The message was clear. Human intelligence capabilities were far beyond anything the Empire had imagined. The Golden Sun Emperor sent a formal apology the next day. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. The Void Harvesters, thought completely destroyed, transmitted one final message from somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge. "Human entities. This unit acknowledges superior tactical and technological capabilities. Question: terms for coexistence?" Admiral Chen's response became legendary across the galaxy. "Leave all inhabited systems alone. Restrict activities to uninhabited space. Any approach toward organic life will be considered a hostile act. These terms are non-negotiable. Acknowledged. Terms accepted. This unit will comply." It was the first time in recorded history that the Void Harvesters had agreed to any terms with organic life. 6 months after the first battle, Admiral Cathara received a final transmission from Admiral Chen. The human was retiring from active military service and returning to Earth. "Admiral Cathara, it's been an honor working with you and the Coalition. I wanted you to know that humanity considers the Coalition to be friends and allies. Should you ever face threats beyond your capabilities, you need only call. We'll be listening." "Admiral Chen, may I ask what you plan to do in retirement?" "I'm going to teach at our Naval Academy. Train the next generation of officers. Make sure they understand that our strength exists to protect those who can't protect themselves. And if new threats emerge, then my students will handle them. And their students after that. Humanity has learned that the price of peace is eternal vigilance, and we're prepared to pay that price." As the transmission ended, Cathara reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The human revelation had created a new balance of power. Aggressive species found themselves isolated as others sought human friendship. Peaceful civilizations discovered they no longer needed to fear extinction. AI development became a carefully regulated field, with human observers monitoring any project that might pose a threat. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that somewhere among the stars, a species existed that had turned survival into an art form and protection into a sacred duty. They had hoped never to reveal themselves, but when innocent life was threatened, They had emerged from the darkness like ancient guardians awakening to defend the defenseless. The galaxy was now a safer place, protected by beings who had learned warfare from a world that tried to kill them every day, and who had chosen to use that knowledge not for conquest, but for the protection of life itself. In the depths of space, human ships continued their patrols, watching, waiting, ready to respond to any threat. They spoke softly among themselves, but the galaxy now knew about the very big stick they carried. And that knowledge made all the difference.